In China, you see autonomous trucks going through highways. In the States, you see robotaxis everywhere. And it's just, you can just hail one whenever you want and it will take you. And I can't see why it wouldn't happen with the UK.
Right. Welcome to Calling All Stations, the transport podcast. I'm Christian Warmer, an author and journalist who has covered transport for the past 30 years. In every episode, we try to keep you up to date with the most engaging news stories, policy developments, and interviews in the transport world. And with me is my regular co-presenter, Mark Walker, who has spent decades looking at transport policies and legislation. So, Mark, what are we covering today?
Hello, Christian, and hello to our listeners. In this episode, we're returning to Wales to hear from James Price, the Chief Executive Officer of Transport for Wales, about dramatic developments in the rail network in Wales. We'll also be talking to Beata Szoboszlai, who is the head of the Smart Mobility Living Lab, about technological innovation around autonomous vehicles, continuing a theme of our series of podcasts. Loyal listeners will know that in episode 13 of season 3, Christian spoke at length with Professor Mark Barry, who was the inspiration for the creation of the South Wales Metro, which is in the process of transforming rail travel in and around the Cardiff capital region and the surrounding areas. In this episode, Christian has been speaking to James Price, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Transport for Wales, the organisation which carries out the policies of the Welsh Government, not just for the South Wales Metro, but for rail services throughout the entirety of Wales. And he's been hearing from James about the very significant developments that are taking place across the nation.
I'm at the very impressive Taff Wells Depot and Control Centre, where the new tram trains will be looked after. And I'm with James Price, who is the Chief Executive of Transport for Wales, who will tell me about the pretty amazing developments in South Wales on what were the old Cardiff Valley lines and elsewhere. So, James, tell me really what this project is all about, because it involves more than £1 billion in infrastructure, more than £800 million in new trains. So this is big stuff, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And is it okay if I start by talking about Transport for Wales as a whole?
Absolutely.
And then we'll narrow in
Absolutely.
to the Core Valleys lines and the Metro project.
Yeah.
So Transport for Wales is a company owned by government that has been set up to advise on policy and planning, but we don't have a policy function, we just advise, and to deliver projects and to deliver day-to-day services.
And you're beholden to the Welsh Assembly?
We are owned by the Welsh Government, yes, and then the Senedd, which is the Welsh Parliament, is where the politicians sit who will scrutinise us. But because we run services into England as well, some of our services are run for the DfT, and therefore we receive scrutiny from the UK government as well as the Welsh Government. Technically, we receive money from the UK government as well as the Welsh Government, and projects like Core Valleys lines, whilst the majority of the funding has come from the Welsh Government because it's in Wales, aspects of the funding have come from the UK Government, and actually for Core Valleys lines also from the back end of the European Union as well.
Right. So basically you're in charge of all the railways in Wales, and you've taken over the franchise in a way that, because it was, of course, famously Arriva that was the franchise holder, and so now it's yourselves, is it?
That's quite correct. So on a Wales-wide basis, we run the vast majority of services in Wales. We run all the services in South East Wales, on the metro area. In terms of what does that mean on a day-to-day basis, Network Rail owns the tracks outside of the South Wales valleys, and we run our services on them in the same way that a standard train operating company would do, and we might talk about Great British Rail later. But within the South Wales Valleys area, what we call the core valleys lines, the old lines that used to serve Cardiff and the surrounding valleys, a few years ago we took over those lines. We bought them, actually, technically, from Network Rail.
For £1, probably.
Well, we bought, it's an interesting story. So we actually bought them at what was deemed to be market value or asset value. But then there was a governmental transaction back into the Welsh government to cover the value. So it was a net sum transaction between two different parts of government. But in order to keep Network Rail's balance book whole, they received, at least in theory, the full value sum. So it's an interesting thing, because I was arguing it should have just been done for £1 because I thought it would have been easier. But because of all the historic borrowings, it was done in a more complicated way.
To play these games.
Absolutely. But the more interesting thing, I guess, is that now we have a vertically integrated railway all under the banner of Transport for Wales that we have been running in South East Wales for several years now. And it's also the part of our railway that is performing by far the best. So we regularly see what we call PTL, passenger time lost, which equates to on time, basically, in the mid-90s percentage, which if it was a separate train operating company, would be the highest performing train operating company in the UK. So thinking about GBR, that is a good example of what can be achieved, A, with some investment, and that's really important, B, with a lot of management presence and focus, and a team that really wants to do a good job, but with vertical integration.
So it's an integrated railway with both track and train kind of brought together. So just explain to the listeners what these lines are. The Cardiff Valley lines, they were once a franchise of their own. I'm old enough to remember that. And then now, after a period with Arriva, they've gone into part of your remit. Just what are these lines and how many of them are there?
Okay, so the history of many of these lines, if you follow them right back, of course, was that these were lines that were being used for heavy freight and in the main coal from the Valley Heads down towards Cardiff Bay and then to be sent around the world.
Right.
Some of them built very, very quickly in the day when you look back on it. Of course, many of them not in existence any longer. But the ones that we have are going from pretty much Cardiff Bay up through to Cardiff Queen Street, and then up to Treherbert, Aberdare and Merthyr, and then up to Rumney on the other side, serving many stations in between that. The mileage that we cover, or the passengers that we take anyway, is over 50% of our passengers travel with us on our Valleys line services, despite the fact that it's only
50% of what? Sorry.
Our total passengers are on the Valleys. Of the whole of Wales are on Valleys, despite the fact that Valleys is probably only 10 or 15% of the total Wales network.
Right.
So it's a bit like, if anyone understands the trunk road network, the Valleys lines feel quite a bit like the trunk road network, as in quite a small total length, but very, very intensively used. Now, there is a political and a societal and an economic sort of problem with that, which is Transport for Wales exists for the whole of Wales, not just for South East Wales.
Right.
And one of our challenges is how to provide high quality services to all of Wales. One of the things that we are doing on that, or the most obvious thing that we have done on that, is to increase the amount of rolling stock we have running on all of the Network Rail routes and replacing all of that with longer, better, newer trains. So that's the CAF 197 units, if anyone's interested. And then
they're coming into stream now?
For everywhere other than the Cambrian line, they are already in. So if you were to look at North Wales universally runs new rolling stock.
It just so happened I travelled on the Cambrian line a few weeks ago and they weren't there, right?
No. So Cambrian is the only place outside the valleys where you will see legacy rolling stock, pretty much. So that's one of the things we're doing. Other things that we have been doing is to...
Sorry, when are they going to be
on Cambrian? Next, as soon as possible next year is the honest answer.
So then Wales will have a completely new fleet of trains?
Pretty much, yes. Depending on how you present new, and obviously all of this stuff is getting a year older every year, but we will have replaced all of it, with something much better than we had before. And then we have quite significantly increased the timetable provision outside of South East Wales as well as inside South East Wales. So, for example, the North Wales timetable is going to have a significant uplift next year, which will see doubling of frequencies in quite a few areas. In South Wales, on the South Wales main line, somewhere like Pencoed, so basically a doubling of frequency. And then if you look into North East Wales, we're working on a project which is similar to the Valleys lines, but it's right at the beginning of the project at the minute, around Network North Wales, which is how do we create the type of connectivity that we have been building in South East Wales in North East Wales. The challenge, of course, is in other parts of Wales, we don't have the legacy of this Victorian infrastructure that we can build upon. So it tends to be more expensive, and it also is more multimodal. So the role of bus and the role of coach, the role of light rail, guided bus, all of those things will be very important.
So James, tell me about the tram trains and why these were necessary.
Yeah, so the tram trains is a different proposition from the tri-mode normal trains, which are 756 classes. Tram trains are 398, both made by Stadler. And the proposition for the tram trains is exactly that. They can operate as a train when they're on the normal rail network, where they can run far faster than a tram could because we've got a lot of distance to cover, but they can also run on the street and come off the network.
But at the moment, there's no bits where they'll go onto the street.
So that's the interesting point. So there is no track currently, but there are active plans, and when I say active plans, fully funded plans to run the first piece of on-street by 2027, 2028 from the back side of Cardiff Central Station, that's the south side in my mind, down towards Cardiff Bay. So the tram trains do have a place all ready to go on street. There's lots of other longer term plans.
But this will involve laying some new track alongside the road. Right.
The contracts have been let. Cardiff Council is the promoter of the scheme. It's got UK government money in effect in it. It's got Cardiff Council money. It's got Welsh government money in it. So there is a place for these vehicles to be used.
This will be a first, because there was Rotherham had some tram trains, which I've been on. Opened a long time ago by I think Goldsmith when he was transport minister. So how will this work? I mean, will this be the start of a network of trams in Cardiff?
Well, that's the plan. And certainly that will be Cardiff Council's plan. They would want to see this extended further down past the final stop in Cardiff Bay, around past the Opera House, and then just trying to get my bearings here, eastwards, back down towards Newport. But of course, this isn't just about Cardiff either, and the original vision absolutely still stands. So if we were to view our first bit of on-street running as a bit of a proof of concept, there are lots of other places further into the valleys and further north within Cardiff where there's significant interest. So the most famous one, I guess, is the so-called Northwest Corridor, which has been described quite a lot, which would see from the suburb of Llandaff, where there's significant house building taking place, all the way up into RCT, a new tram corridor going in there. Now, these are all some years...
Sorry, into RCT?
Rhondda Cynon Taf, where we are now, basically. These projects are some way off, by definition. Right. They'll be dictated by political cycles and when there's funding available, but they're inherently linked to regeneration, economic development, and I am certain that many of these projects will come to life.
Right. Okay. So just one last question on the tri-modes. How often will these pantographs have to come down and up, and is that automatic?
Okay, very good question.
You know, is it going to be problematic?
So they will come up and down quite a lot, is the answer.
So there's quite a lot of sections where...
Yes, many tens of sections. So we're not talking about 3 or 4, many tens of sections where this will happen, which is why it needed to be automated. Can't be left to a driver, which is no disrespect to a driver, but if you were to get this wrong, you'd be ripping down wires and various other things. Yeah. And there are many distractions potentially when you're driving, particularly if you're driving in tram mode, where you obviously have got line of sight to be looking at. Right. So the way these work is the smart technology is actually on the train, but the track has a series of beacons on it, which put out an RFID type signal.
RFID?
It's a radio frequency signal.
Right.
The same type of way that your credit card works, I believe.
Right.
But you're getting to the end of my technical knowledge on that. But I do know it puts out a signal. The train reads the signal, or should read the signal. And depending on where the beacon is and how many miles travelled since the last one, the train will know exactly where it is, and then the train will automatically perform the function required of it. That function could be pan up, pan down, switch the batteries, switch back to 25,000 volts, switch to diesel, open the doors on the left side, open the doors on the right side, etc., etc. The good news is that system is working currently as we speak. So every single Stadler unit that you will see go past us up to Treherbert Aberdare Merthyr, and that's pretty much every single service every day for the last 2 years, uses this every time it goes through a section. Initially, our success rate was about 99.7%, something like that. Now, you might say, well, that's really good, but what about the 0.3% where you're ripping a wire down then, James? Yeah. The good news is, obviously, we didn't build a system where that can happen. The pans, if the wire's stopping, the wires gradually go up, so the pans go up, reach their final extension, and then they drop back down. But also, the train driver, when there is an issue, will get an alert if the beacon is not read, and the train driver themselves can then intervene. We have got a much better reliability than even that initial figure I gave now. Right. And there were 2 issues that we were facing. The first was marginal water ingress into the beacons, which was gradually degrading their ability to send the signal. Interesting as to why that should have happened, because these are not new beacons. Well, sorry, they are new beacons, but it's not a new design. It's used all across Europe, and this was the first place it had been seen. Now, Wales is...
It rains a lot.
Well, I was going to say Wales is quite wet, but I don't think it's wetter than the wettest part of Europe, and it rains everywhere. But something happened, which is unfortunate. What we have done with that is to work with the supplier, a company called Seller, to redesign the beacon. And so far, the redesigned unit is not letting the water in, so that's good. The second thing that we found, and this was in a very, very small number of cases, that I think the rolling stock community would use the term the kinetic envelope of the vehicle, was potentially meaning that the reader was marginally in the wrong place for the track. Maybe it was coming round a bend, at a certain speed, and that led to a number, again, a ridiculously small but still real number of beacon misreads. We are still working that through.
But you haven't had any pantographs smash into
no,
bridges,
and
right?
what we've done with that one, just as a sort of make do amend, but it's absolutely working, is we've doubled up the beacons in those locations, and the train is now reading one or other of them.
Right.
So the system is reliable, it is working despite its complexity. And to be fair, the people who did the original system design are to be applauded, because whilst we had to play around with a couple things, the fundamental system design, which, as I say, is a first and is complicated, absolutely has worked, and it's worked for a sustained period of time.
Okay, so let's ask a wider question here, which is, this is an awful lot of money to spend on a railway that was pretty not greatly used before. I mean, is this money well spent, or is this, are you getting something that is, rather overbuilt for really what is needed? I mean, how many people are actually going to use it? Is it kind of worthwhile?
So, as a person who has been a commuter pretty much their whole life, using this section of track, I can attest, as the numbers will, and we'll give you some of the numbers, that this is a heavily utilised railway. Right at the beginning, I think I said it's 10% of our network, but we take well over 50% of our passengers on that network. It is the most heavily utilised network in Wales. It runs through very heavily populated areas, and I guess the next bit is a plus and a minus. The only way in and out of a lot of these communities is either a road called the A470, which actually you have to get off the A470 for some of these communities as you get towards the top, which gets heavily congested, or the railway, or don't bother. So the railway is a lifeline for anyone who has to commute every day. Now, you might say, well, lots of people don't commute anymore since COVID, but what we are absolutely seeing is that people are, rightly or wrongly, being told they have to come back to the office. Our growth on passenger numbers has been in double digits for the last 3 years. In fact, we've outperformed pretty much every other part of the UK network. So I have absolutely no doubt that it's something that was worth doing, and it's a heavily utilised asset. Right. Our challenge, I think, is to make it heavily utilised throughout the day, not just in the peaks, to make it part of the way everybody lives their life.
Right, and has it stimulated development?
So yes, but there's a lot more to come. So the three areas I would point out, and we'll do it maybe in reverse order of societal importance, okay? So biggest numbers, arguably least societally important, arguably, would be the centre of Cardiff itself. So if you go around anywhere around the Cardiff Central, you will see massive development that's gone in there and huge numbers of jobs. Interestingly, that development itself was badged and funded as Metro Central. The fact that the metro was going in there was one of the key selling points for the people who financed that project and the businesses that went in there. So that in and of itself, I cannot remember the figure, but it's tens of billions worth of money has gone in as a consequence of that. Move further up the valleys, where we are now, Taffswell, you can see in the high street of Taffswell a very different feeling than there was before. People who live in Taffswell might say, well, you've also put a lot of orange coats in here, and you've been very annoying to the community as you were building this, and all of that is true. But the legacy is businesses that were in Cardiff moving here because it's cheaper to locate here on the back of the connectivity. And
you've got a brand new station there with lifts and things. Which
absolutely. Then go up to a place like Pontypridd, and there is lots more examples, but I just wanted to give you three, where TfW is now headquartered in in a office block that was able to be financed because of this project. Lots of other jobs have moved back into the centre of Pontypridd, and Pontypridd itself is being reimagined. And I could well imagine Pontypridd in 10 years' time, in a good way, being massively more successful than it even is today. And it's not just about the metro, but without the metro, those things wouldn't be able to happen.
Can you try and prove all that to politicians, or because it's a constant battle to kind of get these sort of infrastructure built, and so I think those supporting these sort of schemes need absolute proof that it's doing a wider economic job.
I think you're right, and of course the way that transport projects are typically looked at doesn't help with those type of arguments. So people look at time savings, which are important. They look at accident reductions, which clearly are important, but it misses the point. Most of these type of schemes are not there for time savings or accident reductions. They are there for wider economic and social benefit, which of course is the one thing that we don't tend to measure. Now, the good news is, I guess, that the Valleys Lines project itself stacked up pretty well, even against those very boring metrics.
Right.
And we're measuring ourselves against that. So
which is the wrong
way of doing it.
The web tag method.
But unusually, this project has got a BCR that is bigger than 1. So we can say it was worth
a BCR.
Benefit cost ratio. So it was worth doing it, even on that narrow measure. Right. What we are also doing is measuring the wider piece to tell the story. And for what it's worth, as someone who's worked in all different parts of government, including Treasury, and spent a long time in delivery, trying to measure and argue on the basis of why you are doing something is what we should all be doing. Why we're all playing this weird game about arguing that a project is for something that it's not for is beyond me.
So this will require continued subsidy. I mean, this railway.
Yes, I mean that's
because of the wider economic.
Absolutely,
benefits.
It's a public good, and as anyone who's studied any amount of economics knows, that the public good is all about externalities. This one has huge positive externalities, which cannot be brought within the confines of the private sector. Hence, it's a public good. Many other things have got negative externalities, but luckily not this one.
Okay, just one last thing. I mean, you've also innovated pay-as-you-go, and this is a novelty in outside of London.
It is, and I think the team should be rightly proud of what they've done here, because they've done it very quickly, and it's been very effective. So this is exactly what you would see if you went to London. Basically, tap in, tap out. It allows us to drop our fares marginally as well, so it's the cheapest way to travel with us and the easiest way to travel with us, and we are seeing massive take-up rates on it. What I would say to anyone else in the industry who is interested in doing this is, with a good team, and I suppose that's always a crucial point, and with a good supplier, it has been much more predictable and much easier to do than I thought. Let's put it that way. It has been one of the most predictable projects so far that we have delivered on the railway.
Okay, and so just last question, looking forward, are you expecting double digits growth over the next few years as well?
I'm trying to achieve that, absolutely, and that's what we should do. But interestingly, as we predict that future growth, it won't be very long before we start to get into capacity issues again. So we have roughly increased our ability to carry people by 60 to 70%. Do the sums. It doesn't take very many years to run that out. And then the question is, what do we do after that? I think this is the wrong answer, by the way. Do we price people off the network? Do we leave people behind? Or do we start to think now about investing for the next stage of the future? Now, my argument is start to think now about the next stage of the future. Of course, government funding is a very contested space, and it needs to go on the things that are most important, which takes you back to your point around can we demonstrate the importance of this type of activity and the advocacy around that.
Well, thank you, James. That's a really terrific interview, and I'm sure our listeners will want to come here to, as I have, to sample your new wonderful train. So thank you very much.
Since we began calling All Stations the Transport Podcast nearly 3 years ago, we've returned several times to the subject of autonomous vehicles, a matter in which Christian has taken a close interest for many years. In this episode, Christian has been speaking to Beata Szoboszlai, who is Head of Innovation Partnerships for an organisation called TRL, which many people might recall used to be known as the Transport Research Laboratory. They have an institution called the Smart Mobility Living Lab, which is looking closely at how technology can be used to deploy autonomous vehicles. And here's Christian's interview with Beata.
I'm at the Smart Mobility Living Lab in Woolwich, which is a kind of testing ground for new transport technologies. And I'm with their Head of Innovation, Beata Szoboszlai, who is going to tell us a bit about what they do here and what she thinks they're going to be doing over the next few years. So, Beata, tell me what your basic testing ground is about here.
Hi, Christian. Thank you for being here and interested in the Living Lab. What we do here is quite unique because this is the only testing site where you can test autonomous vehicles or human behavior, the behavior of cyclists, pedestrians in a real urban environment. In the UK, you can't do it really anywhere else. And we have been around since 2020.
And you have amazing equipment I've seen here. You have a whole network of cameras and sensors around Woolwich and Greenwich.
Yeah, that's true.
Can you explain how that works?
So basically we cover 25-kilometer roadside network where you can just plug and play any sensor or radar or a vehicle, just put it down into the roads of London, and we can monitor its movement through almost 300 cameras and an instrumented network of lampposts and cabinets. And the data that we collect would come back to the control center to a fiber network, which is 100% owned by us and safe and secure.
So, and the point of doing this is to test out different types of equipment, but possibly for autonomous vehicles a lot, and other stuff as well.
Yeah, that's what we do. Test, trial, and assure technologies that are either in a current development phase or already been launched, and they need an assurance that it works as the owner of the product says it works, like benchmarking.
Right, and now this came out, I think originally there was a test in Greenwich a few years ago of autonomous vehicles, wasn't there?
Yes, yeah, it was an autonomous shuttle back in 2014 called the Gateway Project. That was quite an inspirational collaboration between public and private organizations, and we were testing an autonomous shuttle to bring people around the O2 area it just felt the right thing to do, to look for an investment to create a testing facility in London.
And this is what you've done. This is this result of this. But it's interesting that was 12 years ago. I didn't realise that. I didn't realise it was so far away. And yet we still don't have autonomous vehicles, do we? But
no.
They are apparently coming to London, is that right?
Well, that's what we all see from the news and the media, that next year, April 2026, we are going to have robotaxis.
And do you think that is the case?
I think there is an ambition behind it, and perhaps they will delay it, that they have been delaying the legislation as well for some years now. But maybe we will see a gradual implementation of autonomous technologies in mobility services from April going onwards. Maybe it won't be like a whole fleet of robotaxis that will just occupy London.
So it's not going to be
streets.
like San Francisco straight away.
I don't think so. That's
Right.
not how I see it. Yeah.
But you think there might be some testing and lots of work for you to do this?
Let's hope that is going to be the case, Christian.
And do you think this is feasible? Do you think that eventually, in maybe 10, 15 years' time, there will be lots of these vehicles around?
If we see what's happening in the States and in China,
Yeah.
robo-taxis, autonomous vehicles, they're being used by companies and by private individuals to move themselves and their goods from A to B. In China, you see autonomous trucks going through highways. In the States, you see robo-taxis everywhere. And it's just, you can just hail one whenever you want and it will take you. And I can't see why it wouldn't happen with the UK.
Right. Okay, you told me about an interesting test in Luxembourg, for example.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell me about that?
Yeah, so the way I see this technology to become more apparent and to introduce themselves into a city or a country is when there is a need.
Right.
And in Luxembourg, it's your right to claim back your taxi costs if you need to go to the hospital or go home from the hospital. And what happened with the city leadership, they were looking for a cheaper way to provide this service, and they teamed up with Pony AI and the vehicle manufacturer to trial an autonomous shuttle, autonomous robotaxi service for patients. And it's happening. I think it's the second stage of the trial, and it feels like they like it.
Right. That's a very interesting example because it's a particular use case. And maybe is that why the way that autonomous cars are going to appear? There's going to be little use cases and then it will build up. That's your view.
I think it's very well said. I agree with that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm sure I'll come back here in the future and look at other tests that you're doing. And I think that London's going to be a busy place for autonomous vehicle technology over the next few years. So it's going to be very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.
The whole field of autonomous vehicles is a rapidly changing one. And Christian, even since your conversation with Beata, there have been some further developments.
Yes, indeed, Mark. And we've had this amazing announcement from Waymo. Waymo is actually owned by Alphabet, which is Google, and is by far the world leader in autonomous vehicle development outside of China, and has autonomous cars operating in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Austin, and a few other American cities. And they put out this slightly ludicrous press release saying, "Hello, Londoners, we're coming across the pond to offer you driverless car technology in London," as if really we had all been waiting with bated breath for this announcement. And so they say that there are going to be some autonomous vehicles by spring next year on London streets. Now, there is no way that these can be fully autonomous. There will have to be an operator or driver in them because the cars will not have passed through the various hoops they have to pass under the legislation passed by the Tory government to ensure that the features they operate are safe. And the legislation ensures that all aspects of driver aids are kind of effectively tested for their safety. And these cars will require an awful lot of testing in order to be allowed to be driven or autonomously, in other words, without a driver. So autonomous car technology is not really coming to London next year. What they are going to do is kind of trial it. Now, I'm even skeptical about their ability to do this. I mean, the layout of the streets in London is so different, even from San Francisco, which is still basically a grid system. And we don't have the wide roads that they have. They don't. They in urban areas where most roads are basically 4 lanes, 2 lanes each way, and so on. There's so many little windy streets. I would have thought there's, even with the skyscrapers we have in places, there must be places where it's very difficult to get any sort of signal at all, and therefore, will they be able to cope with that? I mean, all sorts of questions about this. But what is ridiculous, Mark, is that there's still all this hype about it. It's as if it's kind of really going to change our lives. And now, I've followed this story, as you know, for the last 10 years. And initially, it was presented as these things are going to be much safer. They're going to ensure there's a great reduction in accidents. They're going to allow you to drive to work and send the car back and take the kids to school and then take your grandparents to hospital and so on. And that vision has gone, really. The car companies are no longer kind of putting forward that idea. So instead, they're saying, well, this is going to be, fantastic. You can hop in a robo taxi. But I just don't buy this at all. I mean, amazingly, in the press release that Waymo put out, there was a statement from a senior executive of the Royal National Institute of the Blind who said, oh, we've been waiting for this technology for ages. This is going to liberate blind people and so on. And you think, hold on a sec, how is it going to liberate blind people? How is it going to be easy for blind people to get into a car they can't see, which has to pull up, and nobody to open the door for them, nobody to put their baggage in the back? I mean, the thing is completely ludicrous, just doesn't make sense to me.
And I'm afraid that's something that's baffled me with all of this as well, ever since it started. What is the point? Why is billions of dollars and pounds being invested in these things? And what I also find astounding are the claims on the number of jobs that these autonomous vehicles are allegedly going to create, which doesn't seem to take into account the number of jobs that they will destroy. The thousands of professional drivers in the taxi, delivery, and haulage trades eventually, who will be put out of work by all of this.
I know the figure that's been used, Mark, as you've seen, is that they say there's 38,000 jobs and 43 billion in gross value added, which is added to GNP, will be created by 2035 by these vehicles. I can assure you that these vehicles will not be current on our streets in 2035. There might be some with some use cases and whatever, but they are not going to be the dominant form of transport. And secondly, how do you work out this job thing? Apparently, it goes to some research that was back in 2022. I don't know, some kind of obscure research, but it's an absolutely ridiculous notion that this is going to create a lot of jobs. I mean, it's going to destroy jobs if it was really going to function. But I don't think it will function. So the whole thing is a mystery, Mark, and it's all about hype. And ever since I've been writing about this, it's really the hype that I've kind of been knocking. Maybe these things might be useful in the long term, and they might kind of save some hassle of driving, and they might help some people. But it's the hype that I think we really have to knock.
I think we're probably looking more at technology that can assist drivers, aren't we? That rather than replace drivers, it seems in truth. I mean, the other thing that astounds me is that we're introducing all of this these new vehicles and technology onto the road network, and the enforcement of our existing road traffic laws is so abysmal that I was only listening yesterday to a Nicky Campbell Radio 5 Live program with people phoning in with their experiences of the lawlessness on the highways, even with the existing vehicles that are deployed. So let alone what further complications will be generated by these vehicles, and whether there'll be any enforcement of those laws that you mentioned on how they're going to operate.
Well, we'll keep our eye on this space, and we're going to, certainly cover it in future podcasts because partly because of my own personal obsession, but also because of the media obsession with it, and also because of the implications of it. And I'll tell you one thing, Mark, the first time they kill somebody, and that will happen at some point, there will be immediate kind of retreat about this technology. And that's happened before. So Uber actually was involved in an accident in Las Vegas 6 or 7 years ago, and they killed a woman who was pushing a bicycle, and it was a driver's car that wasn't the operator in it wasn't looking properly, and they killed this woman. And it basically Uber pulled out at the time out of it. And then last year, Cruise, which was also having developing drivers' cars, actually one of their cars ran over a woman, and then who had actually been hit by another car, and the car pulled over, and in pulling over, ran over her. And Cruise again pulled out largely out of the whole technology. So watch this space. When somebody gets seriously hurt or killed by this, because there'll be immediate retreats.
Here's Christian's final thought from the Departure Lounge.
Well, this is a favourite campaign of mine that I've been writing about for years. In 1998, I wrote a piece for the London Evening Standard advocating the pedestrianisation of London's Oxford Street, which at the time was kind of performing rather better then than it does now. It's deteriorated greatly since then. And just suggesting that it was madness to have, all these people kind of crammed onto small pavements, whereas, a few buses, taxis, and private cars were kind of squeezing their way through them. And now, at last, it seems it's going to happen with, Sadiq Khan, conscious that there's local elections where the colour of the council covering Westminster might well change, and therefore it's currently Labour, and he needs their support to kind of push this through as quickly as possible, and is hoping to actually pedestrianise a section of it before the elections in May next year. And I think this is fantastically exciting. And I do actually claim a slight amount of responsibility for this, because when I was campaigning to be the Labour candidate for mayor, I mentioned this in the first hustings that I attended, and Sadiq at the time said, "Oh, that's a good idea. I'll take that up." So, maybe I have some responsibility for it, so I can be proud that I contributed to this change. So let's hope it happens, and happens quickly.
Calling All Stations, the Transport podcast with Christian Walmart, is produced by Cogitamus Limited, a leading provider of public affairs consultancy services in the sector. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please consider giving us a 5-star rating with whichever platform you use. Do follow us on social media channels, including Blue Sky, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Our handle on X is @AllStationsPod.